Behind the bright lights and adrenaline of pro sports is an equally exciting world of negotiations and deal making.
That's what we cover each week on our podcast, The Deal.
I'm Alex Rodriguez, former baseball player turned business executive.
And I'm Jason Kelly, chief correspondent for Bloomberg Originals. Over the next couple months, we'll hear from all stars like Jay Williams.
I want to be an owner one day.
Billie Jean King.
Learn the business.
And so many more. Listen to The Deal on Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. With Cybersecurity Awareness Month winding down, LifeLock wants to remind you to update your software. These updates will patch up security issues that identity thieves can exploit to gain access to your personal info. For comprehensive identity theft protection, there's LifeLock. LifeLock alerts you to more uses of your personal info and fixes issues that arise. Protect your identity today with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast.
Do you like the Daily Blast but want even more analysis of the biggest headlines from around the world? Do you want an ad-free listening experience so there's nothing between you and expert commentary every day? Consider becoming a member of the DSR Network, where you'll also gain access to exclusive content across all of the DSR Network podcasts. Listeners of the Daily Blast can get 30% off of a monthly or annual membership using code BLAST at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code BLAST at thedsrnetwork.com/buy.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. The other day, Donald Trump traveled to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and play-acted as a McDonald's worker. His propagandists erupted in delirium, hailing it as akin to the greatest act of political theater in human history. But Trump ran into trouble. He evaded a question about whether he would support a minimum wage hike, producing some pretty scalding headlines. Which gets at a larger scam. Trump enjoys public approval on the economy, even though his agenda for working people is borderline non-existent, whereas Harris has a detailed economic agenda for working and middle-class people alike. HuffPost senior reporter Jonathan Cohn has written a good new piece laying out what this McDonald's stunt really tells us about that larger story. So we invited him on to talk about all of it. Great to have you on, John.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
John, let's quickly talk about what happened at the McDonald's. This was in Bucks County, classic swing county outside Philadelphia. The whole thing was a Potemkin stunt. The customers were cleared in advance. And then there was the minimum wage question, which is going to be important to a lot of service industry workers. Can you walk us through the basics of what happened?
This was a standard campaign. Put your candidate, in a kind of setting that makes him look relatable, something, every day. Which has been done in politics for as long as I've been around in politics. I mean, it's not like an original idea. But, okay, fine. That's a sort of standard. There was that element of it. There was a second element of it, which is, of course, they're trying to troll Kamala Harris here. And I'm sure your listeners have probably followed this, but just to review, Kamala Harris has many times talked about working in McDonald's as a college student to help pay her bills. Some point, people went looking for records of this. They could not find records of it, which is like the least surprising thing ever. I mean, every reason in the world to think she did work there. The Trump people and his followers, they think this is some lie. So by going to, McDonald's, theoretically, he was trolling her. But then, on a third kind of what I think was the most important level, which is Trump is all about the vibe that I'm for the average American. I'm for working class Americans. Kamala Harris is an elitist. She's part of this leadership class that is ruining your lives, has ruined your lives.
And the minimum wage question comes up, right?
Well, it certainly does. And that's, where this episode got interesting. You got a question about the minimum wage. Hey, do you support a higher minimum wage? And of course, fast food workers at McDonald's are among those who would benefit from a higher minimum wage. And he, totally dodged the question, wouldn't answer it, and said, "Oh, I can't remember his exact words. You may have it in front of you, but it was a classic Trumpism." Didn't answer. He said, "Oh, but it was wonderful to be here. It was these are great people. They're doing great things," which frankly is kind of a metaphor for the way he's been running his campaign. He talks about the working class. He talks about loving working class Americans. But then when you dig into his positions on policy, he's not proposing to do a lot that would help the working class, arguably. And in fact, what he does have on his agenda looks like it's going to hurt the working class.
I want to go back to your piece for a sec, which I thought did a novel thing. It, as you pointed out earlier, looked at how Kamala Harris actually did work at a McDonald's as a summer job in her youth. And you pointed out that her life experiences actually did inform her economic agenda, whereas Trump does not have life experiences that formed or informed his economic agenda, except maybe when it comes to promising billionaires tax cuts. Can you talk about that difference? That it's a fundamental difference that I think might be lost on some people, but seems critical to me.
Harris, authentically grew up in a kind of working middle class neighborhood. She had a single mother who was trying to balance career and child rearing. And she, as she got older, she was very involved with, among other things, caring for her own mother when her mother was dying from cancer. And she has talked about those experiences a lot. And she has said, hey, I understand what an incredible burden it is to try to balance work and family, and how that burden grows even more when you're caring for someone, whether it's a young child or an elderly parent or someone who is sick, which, by the way, is something I think almost every American will go through in life. I have gone. If you haven't yet, you're lucky. You will almost certainly. It's just part of the life cycle. We all do it. And it's so hard and so difficult. And of course, if you go ahead and take a look at her record and you look at what she has proposed when she was in the Senate, when she was running for president the first time, what she is proposing now in her campaign, one of the through lines, one of the constants is that she is extremely attuned to this squeeze on middle-class families, on poor families who have to care for relatives. And she's been standing up for those people, for trying to help them out, to provide assistance. And at the same time, recognizing that what ends up happening frequently is you end up paying people to provide care for your family. And those people traditionally are tremendously underpaid. They don't have job security. They don't have benefits. So another focus of her political career, another focus of her proposal is helping the caregivers who are paid caregivers. And so you see this real link between her lived experience as a child, as an adult, and the way that she sees the world and what she's trying to do for Americans.
I want to get at this big picture that you're talking about here, which is that I think if you step back, Harris's economic agenda is really all about helping people achieve a stable middle class or working class life, or helping them maintain a position in the middle class. There's assistance for people facing financial strain from buying homes, taking care of children, healthcare, drug prices, grocery prices, and something you've written about, a proposal to, and talked about just a minute ago, a proposal to assist people taking care of the elderly, a big strain on some middle-class people. I mean, that's the through line, right? Everything is about middle-class precarity and what to do about that. Can you talk about that bigger idea?
Yeah, it is a through line. And, it's funny, right? There was all this talk for a while. She doesn't have a policy vision. We don't know what she stands for. Even now, there's people like, oh, I don't know what she stands for. She hasn't been detailed. She's actually at this point offered a fairly detailed economic agenda. It includes the pieces that you have. The unifying theme is sort of, security for the middle class, which, of course, has always been a theme of the Democratic Party, at least in my lifetime. I think there's a piece of this, too, that she talks about. And I think it comes up very much in this context, I think is really important, which is she talks about dignity. You always hear her talk about dignity for the middle class. And she talks about it, in caring for her mother who was sick. But also the sort of dignity of being able to have a job that you can provide for your own family. And this is a concept, there's one of her, economic advisors who used to work in the Biden White House, used to work in the Obama White House, a guy named Gene Sperling, wrote a whole book about this. And I don't know if it was his doing or whatever. I think she was talking about it beforehand. But this idea that one of government's goals should be that it's not to, establish equality, make sure everyone has equal outcomes, but, everybody should have security. Everyone should be able to provide for their own family. Everyone should have the dignity to be able to go through that in life. And, that is a theme of her policy. You can agree or disagree with the policies. Obviously, you can think there are conservatives who would argue that what she's proposing will actually harm, the middle class. And, and now these are arguments, are worth having. But in terms of what she is trying to do, it's so clear that her life experience maps onto what she is proposing.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me think that Trump's stunt was really phoned in. I'm really struck by kind of how haphazard and almost like a joke it was to them. I mean, in your piece, you detailed how some of Trump's propagandists hailed this as this extraordinary act of political communication. It's like they're not even trying, right? Kamala Harris worked at a McDonald's. Well, Trump can do a 5-minute photo op at one, and that'll erase Harris's life experiences. Right? They think they've got the economic argument won without even trying, and yet Harris has kind of chipped away at Trump's advantage on this issue in a major way, right? In part by connecting her biography to her agenda and emphasizing her own middle-class background in a way Trump can't. I mean, she's gaining on the question of which candidate would help ordinary people, and that, to me, is the key metric. Where do you think the economic argument stands between them right now in political terms?
Yeah, I think we've seen this in the polls, right? We are seeing her, she started with a big gap on the economy. We have seen her close that gap. At this point, I think it's pretty close. It sort of depends a little bit on how you ask the question and which poll you're looking at. But people, the sort of question of who really kind of gets you and who identifies with you, she's really kind of made a lot of progress there. I can tell you myself, I live in Michigan. I've been doing a lot of reporting, talking to a lot of voters, and it is making an impression on people. I think there are people who don't trust her for one reason or another. They don't know if she has the best policies. They remember the Trump presidency as a better time for them, whatever you think of that, but that's how they remember it. But you hear a lot of people say, at least I do in my interviews, I hear a lot of people saying she's relatable. I feel like she gets me. She understands my position. And I think that's an enormous asset to have in politics. When you look at the winning Democratic presidential candidates in recent history, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, what do they all have in common? Well, they all had that quality that relative to their opponents, people saw them and said, hey, this person gets me. This person cares about me. And, I always thought the key, that the best asset in politics to have is when a voter can say about you, I don't always agree with them. I'm not sure they have all the answers, but I believe they're fighting on my behalf.
Absolutely. And I think a key to that sort of what gets voters to that point is an appreciation of the life arc of the candidate. I remember talking to swing voters outside of Denver and during the 2012 race, when there was a very similar competition going on. Mitt Romney had the advantage on the narrow question of who would better manage the economy because we were fighting our way back from a recession, you may remember. But what I was struck by talking to voters in swing territory was that they just had this sense of who Obama was and his life cycle, his sort of arc in life, that he had a tough time early on and had worked himself up. And that was extremely important to these voters. And I think that's how they sort of see or map out these candidates and their proposals sort of through that prism.
Yeah, I agree. Now, obviously, Trump does have, I think there's lots of people who identify with Trump and think, he relates to them more. Obviously, we wouldn't be in this kind of election if we weren't. And I'm sure the Trump people thought putting him in a McDonald's, would sort of project this image. And if you believe all the social media boosters who went out there instantly with these messages of how this was the greatest thing ever, then, maybe, who knows, maybe that resonated with some people. Personally, I wonder if this thing could backfire. There is something, if there is a world in which it's cosplaying, right? It's like, look, I can do, I'm going to be a McDonald's guy. It's almost too casual. It's a bit insulting.
Yes,
like,
phoned in.
For 15 minutes, I ran the fry machine, and for 15 minutes, I handed some things out the drive-through window. There's a real danger that, for Trump, especially now, because a lot of people noticed he took that dodge on the minimum wage. I think there's a danger we'll see how this plays out. But, you could see this backfiring. And we have examples for that in American political history, too.
Max Bankman, I'm the new doctor.
Welcome aboard the Odyssey.
ABC Thursdays.
This ship is heaven. We're tending to our passengers' dreams.
I'm in.
From 911 executive producer Ryan Murphy comes a splashy new drama on a luxury cruise ship with Joshua Jackson and Don Johnson.
It's your job to keep everyone alive.
She's in VFib. 1, 2, 3. Clear.
I have a pulse.
You're gonna be okay.
Dr. Odyssey. Thursdays, 9/8 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by Financial Times. When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some people more confident than others? With the Financial Times, you form your own opinions with conviction based on unbiased and trusted reporting. FT journalists tackle global issues with an impartial and rigorous mindset, providing the facts and analysis that you need to make up your own mind. Make up your own mind with Financial Times. Visit ft.com/the journal to read free articles and subscribe.
Absolutely. I mean, Dukakis and the tank come to mind. I think we saw some pretty brutal headlines already out of Trump's McDonald's stunt. Philadelphia Inquirer had a headline about the event that read, quote, Trump evasive about raising minimum wage while pretending to work at McDonald's. So I think obviously his propagandists went out there and pulled a whole North Korea thing where it was the greatest thing ever, although I don't know how every single thing Trump does can be the greatest thing ever. Like, is one greater than the other? I don't know how that works exactly, right? But anyway, so I do think it's already backfiring, not in MAGA land or in the MAGA information universe, but I mean, those are bad headlines.
Yeah, that is not the headline you want running in the sort of most influential daily newspaper in, the most important swing state 2 weeks before Election Day.
Absolutely, yeah. And by the way, this whole difference in their story arcs is the reason Trump keeps saying Harris is lying about her stint working at McDonald's. He knows she's gaining on him on the question of who's more in touch with regular people's problems, I think.
Yeah, it would not surprise me at all. They're not. I feel like the Trump campaign in general, they're not that hard to read. They're pretty. It's pretty obvious what they're reacting to and what they're trying to do. And I do think. I wonder sometimes. I think there is this phenomenon on the right side of the conversation right now, where in their echo chamber, they think, trolling, they get very excited when you sort of troll on social media and they feel like that's a win. And
absolutely right. Yeah.
Go on, X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it. And you see, Elon Musk is magnifying all this stuff. You would think that's the case, but I don't know how it plays outside of that world. And if the Philadelphia Inquirer headline's indicative, I think a lot of people are going to look at this with raised eyebrows at best.
Agreed. I think this whole saga highlights something else as well, which is how complicated the battle for working class voters is in this election. You're from Michigan. You probably see it up close. In a weird shift, Harris is actually pulling working class whites away from Trump. CNN's Harry Enton did this interesting analysis, finding that Trump's margins with working class whites, particularly in the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, are shrinking. Flip side of this, though, is Harris is still not where she needs to be with working class non-whites. And so there's this kind of battle underway for service industry workers as opposed to the manufacturing workers we constantly valorize, isn't there? Can you kind of talk about those complexities and how the McDonald's visit plays into all that?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a super complex election, and, the challenge for Harris, there's multiple levels to it. Number one, she's fighting the baggage from the Democratic Party from generations. In Michigan, the memories of free trade agreements that are laid at the feet of both parties, but very much at the Democrats right now. Those memories still linger. There's, the people remember the factories, the offshoring of factories, the lost jobs. She is now, I do think she is making inroads there. But as you say, the polls say she is struggling is the wrong word, but she's not getting the margins that Joe Biden did, that Barack Obama did, certainly among Black voters, among Hispanic voters. And a lot of this is, it's because, we're seeing the same dynamics we're seeing with white voters. There is an education and a class divide. And a lot of this, I will tell you, living in a swing state, that those ads that involve, it's immigration, crime, transgender. I'm a football fan. That's all you see on these games. It's unbelievable. They will go one after another. And I think they're probably resonating. And I think, that the point of those ads, right? Very much the point of those ads is to say, she can't relate to you.
In a funny flipping of the script, Democrats are actually messaging more on the economy than Trump is. As you say, the way that Trump is trying to prosecute the argument for working class voters is to talk about cultural stuff. But Democrats have spent tens of millions of dollars on TV ads in October touting Harris's plans for working in middle-class tax breaks, as well as on health care. So, you often hear from the left, oh, well, Democrats are wounded by their neoliberal past. They only talk about how crazy Trump is. They don't talk about economics enough. But if Harris ends up losing, I don't think anyone can blame it on any failure to talk about economic issues. You're on the front lines of all this advertising. You're seeing a tremendous amount of messaging from Harris and related Democratic groups on economic issues, right?
It's all economics. Yeah, I mean, all the cultural, it is really, it's a very fascinating contrast. So the Trump side is all identity politics, all culture. And again, I think as much as anything else, this is an attempt to say, she doesn't get you. She doesn't understand you. She's an extremist. The Democratic messaging, it's on middle-class tax cuts. It's on, I lowered your prescription drug costs. I'm going to protect Obamacare. I'm going to protect the auto industry. I am going to help you pay for your home. I'm going to stop price gouging. I'm going to help, with, care, home care for your aging relatives. I mean, that is all the advertising I see on the Democratic side. And, we'll see what works. I mean, look, polls say Michigan's a very close state. I think it's same story in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. This is tight. We'll see if it breaks late one way or the other. So, I mean, both sides, it's obviously it's a very, very contested, but certainly when it comes to how the Democrats are messaging and how Kamala Harris is messaging, very focused on the economy. In fact, I will say, just as an aside, the other day, a prominent Republican pollster who I like, and I've read, he's a smart guy, he tweeted out, why aren't the Democrats, campaigning on the economy anymore? I tweeted right back. I said, do you mean like this? And he was very specifically said, why don't they, it used to be Democrats would get up on stage with like electricians and pipe fitters and industrial workers. They don't do that anymore. I'm like, you mean like this? And it was a picture from 2 days before. She was in Lansing, Michigan, on stage in a union hall with like UAW workers at an event that was all about the auto industry. And I'm like, this is all they're doing here. I mean, they're trying.
And this is something you've written about as well, which is that the Biden-Harris agenda actually is a real one for the future of auto work, because the investments in green manufacturing jobs, the manufacturing jobs of the future that the Biden-Harris administration has implemented, are actually creating tens of thousands of advanced manufacturing jobs, whereas Trump and Vance would repeal that and destroy untold numbers of jobs of the future. I just feel a little bit like the Trump team just thinks they've got this one on the issue, and they don't really have to do anything. They can just do a photo op at McDonald's and they can message about trans people and win it that way. I mean, is there a bit of an overconfidence there, a hubris potentially? I mean, isn't that sort of what the McDonald's stunt almost captures very neatly?
Yeah, I mean, they have to be confident, I think, or they're desperate. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that's their way of compensating for desperation. But I think it's sort of ironic that, again, the sort of the social media thing they always like to say is, oh, Kamala Harris, she's just running on vibes. Actually, Trump's running on vibes. I mean, the whole campaign is vibes. It's all about, I mean, that's what McDonald's is. It's a vibe. He's not for the minimum wage. He's not for, helping poor people, people in service jobs to get healthcare. He's not about getting them paid leave. What's he about? But he's at McDonald's, so it's a vibe. Because we all know he likes McDonald's, so it's all vibe. And she's the one coming with policy. She's the one saying, "Hey, I'm going to help you pay for your home. Hey, I'm gonna make sure you have union protections. I'm going to make sure you have healthcare." Does it work? I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, it certainly seems to me if I could pick one or the other, I think I would rather be the one who has an actual record on these policies. But, we'll have to see.
Jonathan Cohn, thanks for coming on with us, man. Really good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.